Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Thursday, August 20th, 2026, episode 578, Governments Never Learn. The full quote is, governments never learn, only people learn. And that's from Milton Friedman. There was a point in time when I was all about Milton Friedman. I had just graduated, finished my doctorate. And then a couple of years later, I read Milton Friedman's Free to Choose. And I talked about this before. And in the first chapter was the story about the graphite pencil. And through that story, I was able to solve, quote unquote, the problem I had with trying to figure out and understand race and racism with how do you get rid of it? How do you overcome or solve the problem of racism? And in that story of the graphite pencil, there's a line in his explanation where he says that people, and basically the story of the graphite pencil, which I've talked about in a really early episode, is that thousands, if not tens of thousands of people all over the world cooperated to produce a product, a graphite pencil, wood pencil, but not to be, all these thousands of people to get paid, then therefore pencils are super expensive. No, they are really, really inexpensive. Even with all this inflation, you can buy a box of pencils for not that much. And so that's when the light bulb went on, when he goes further and says that people from all over the world, people who probably would hate each other if they met each other, cooperate to make the pencil. And then the light bulb went off, and I was like, that's it. The way you overcome racism is you make the race issues a non-issue. You give people something more important, more urgent, a higher priority than just your feelings towards someone else. And that would be to gain wealth. So if I cooperated with this person instead of just hated on this person, I could make some money. That person can make money. I make money. We're better off. And that's what I realized. And so people cooperating, voluntary cooperation is the pathway for wealth. And it makes racism less of an issue because it's only through cooperation that this can happen. In other words, you got to put in the back seat, way in the back seat, all of your emotions so that you can achieve your goal. Now, what stands in the way of all of this wealth creation is regulations. So government regulations are passed. And they give you a story that, oh, it's for your safety. Oh, it's to improve this or that. Oh, it's to fight pollution, whatever. No matter what the explanation is, the reality is that they are protecting something or they're giving privilege to a group of people. And as a result of this kind of hypocrisy, this kind of, double standards for thee, not for me type situation, you have a horrible outcome. Either you have more pollution, you have, increased racism, whatever. Regulations don't solve. And although this is a lesson that is constantly being learned, governments never learn. So I guess the expectation that people have is that the government, this faceless entity, will learn their lesson and improve over time. But this is not the case. Only people learn, especially when you combine it with all of the other things that I've been saying about government, especially the stuff that was included in the Lord Acton, the absolute power corrupts absolutely episode, then you realize that, yeah, governments are not interested in learning. They're just only interested in trying to get away with as much as possible. So when something bad is revealed, whether it's a program, a war, a rule, government will just do it again. They'll change the name, repackage it, and do the same thing over again because it worked the first time and a lot of people got rich. And so they'll do it again. It doesn't matter how many people got hurt. It doesn't matter, if people died. doesn't matter because they made money. So it's the people's responsibility to remember, to remind, somehow keep it in the forefront of our minds, so that when we see another iteration, another version of what just happened, then people will recognize it right away. It's the people's responsibility. But because of all the socialization that's taking place here in the United States, people in America are just really not interested in remembering anything. Uh, Remedial classes at the college level. Many of you would probably be horrified if you ever witnessed it, if you ever saw it. I don't know. It's a sad testimony to the educational system here in the United States. Expectations are practically non-existent. You really, and I've met, after teaching 3 years in the middle school, and some high school students, that expectation of like, I don't have to learn it now. I'll just get accepted to college and I'll learn it there. That kind of, it's hard to beat. So I went in uh, a culture, and trying to swim against that culture is very, very hard. So rather than being depressed all the time, you had to lower your expectations. And I did try to motivate and inspire, but wow, you're just fighting against years of disincentives. And this goes far to explain why the country is the way it is today, why so many people are embracing socialism, why so many people think that democratic socialism is somehow a great idea. Moving to the next topic, rumors of mutiny on the USS Abraham Lincoln. Uh, Sort of as a tangent, but somehow relevant, I posted a meme from 2 years ago. It came up on my memory, and so I reshared it. And the caption was, "Next time a politician talks about war, remember it took them 20 years to replace the Taliban with a better armed Taliban." And so it's for an obvious reason that I posted that. Number one, Afghanistan was just simply a tremendous waste. The amount of resources that was spent on that, only to ruin so many lives, it's just I'm without words. And that was before the Ukraine war was really taken off. So it was almost kind of prescient, sort of predictive to say, well, they pulled out of Afghanistan, they're going to try it again. Who knew that it would be right away? Anyway, so I posted that, and someone I know, who I went to seminary with, was a chaplain, and I'm pretty sure that he served in Afghanistan, and he had to probably minister to a lot of soldiers in Afghanistan. And I'm not that I pretend to know exactly how it feels, but I can imagine it sucked, right? And a lot of people just would suffer the kinds of things that you would expect. Life-threatening situations, the stress, to see your friends die. I've talked to a lot of people who were suffering from issues like that. But he pushed back, right? And he said, and he focused on the better armed Taliban thing. Say, well, the equipment probably was unusable, because that's why they didn't take it with them, because it wasn't worth it. And it seemed to me something of a justification for leaving all of it behind. And you may know that a lot of it was, in fact, used. And the equipment that was left behind was showing up everywhere, even sometimes in Mexico. So there's that problem, right? And so it seemed sort of like a cop out. But I do respect him, and so I sent him back. I sent a reply that basically said that the short service life of the equipment either might be an indication of the harsh conditions there, but it also might have something to do with the way that equipment is either over-engineered or not designed to last, sort of like washing machines here in laundry machines here in the United States, or refrigerators that are designed to break after 5 years, right after the warranty expires. And yes, that is intentional. But anyway, and then I uh, said that the development also of the kinds of weapons was misguided as well. I mean, it's no secret that the M1 Abrams tank requires a tremendous amount of maintenance. The F-35 also, to maintain it, you need a civilian group of mechanics because repairing it is classified. And so, the average serviceman is not allowed to go near it. And that should be a problem. That should be understood as a serious problem, especially in forward areas when you're near a battle or when you're actually fighting a war. Maybe those weapon systems can't be simplified. Maybe you couldn't have a more streamlined system. But if they can all be defeated by comparatively inexpensive weapons, then you should probably rethink everything, right? So an F-35 can be shot down by a shoulder-fired missile, so maybe F-35 isn't worth it. And he missed the fundamental point that the war should not have happened, right? So, I mean, 20 years to replace the Taliban with a better armed Taliban. So maybe 20 years ago, instead of invading Afghanistan, we didn't go at all. And he said, well, 9/11, duh. And, it's a sad argument and it's unfortunate because people who drop 9/11 as if it's a mic drop moment uh, do that so that you don't talk about what happened before 9/11. Like what people don't just wake up in the morning and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to fly a plane into a building. They don't do that. There's a motivation, there's a reason why people would do something like this. But remember, the people who did that were Saudi Arabians, but we invaded Afghanistan. So that always kind of is weird, right? And also, Ron Paul said that you didn't have to send in armies and invade the entire country. You could have sent in hit squads, right? A SEAL team, basically trained to go through the mountains and hunt him down. The dude had diabetes, or what is it? He had bad kidneys. He needed to be hooked up to a dialysis machine 3 times a week. I mean, where is that going to happen? Right. And eventually you should be able to catch him. So what's the problem here? So what was the actual reason? Because I don't believe that was because of 9/11. You don't invade an entire country to look for one person. It just doesn't make any sense. And so what was the real reason? Was it for the heroin? What? Also, I've talked about this before, but after a little while, early on in the 20 years, they realized that they couldn't fight the Taliban. They're everywhere. And so they had to make deals with the Taliban, which by law means that they are collaborating with terrorists, right? And so all of it was just really, really strange, didn't make any sense, should never have started in the first place. Plus, I think of all the lives that were lost, not just American lives, but also the lives of the people over there. And what that did for the next generation of terrorists or the next generations of people who hate the United States. It would have been better if we didn't go, if at the end of it all, nothing changes. And I said, my closing statement was to him was that it would have been better if the conversations he had with soldiers struggling in theater, that instead he had conversations about which Christmas present to buy their kids. I would have preferred that he had those struggles as opposed to the other. But as soon as that war ended, Ukraine started, and so clearly the United States, the people have forgotten. They forgot. They didn't learn their lesson, and they went into another war. And to further put a mark of emphasis on it. Now we have the Iran war. They never learn. And the unfortunate thing is that neither do the people. The vast majority of the people here in the United States just refuse to learn. They stubbornly don't want to learn. They're going to hold on to whatever it is, that little bit of information that makes them feel good, that makes them feel like they're better than everyone else somehow. And that's all they do. They don't think about anything else. They don't think about things on a deeper level. There was a picture, this was a week or two ago, but a picture was sent to Trita Parsi from a wing flap of a plane supposedly on the USS Abraham Lincoln. And I don't know why. It doesn't make sense that the wing would be dusty, but it was dusty. And so people used their finger to write messages into the wing. And some of the things that were written were be a good guy and do what Israel tells you to. Operation Epstein Fury, peace deal number 64 incoming, all this for the Holy Land. I love Israel. I'm a good goyim. So I say this because it says that the people who are actually out there, even on a boat, on a ship, that there's no communication with the outside. I would imagine for security reasons, you don't have internet access, so you can't get news that easily. In spite of that, everyone knows what's going on. People can, I guess, put the pieces together and come up with a narrative, and none of it is good. Plus, I'm sure none of their commanders have given them a good reason why they are still at sea after 9, 10 months, whatever it is. I mean, what are they achieving? What's the purpose? Uh, you know, none of it makes sense. And so I would imagine that if you, even on the best of circumstances, where you had good food, sanitary conditions, um, everything just running smoothly, even then, not to have a clear objective where you are asked to fight for another country and maybe even lose your life for another country, it just doesn't make any sense. And so morale would be really, really low. It would be in the toilet, and you just really hate being there. And when you see things like this, which I never saw before, I had never seen things like this before. And now that you see it and you hear these stories, especially of the suicide attempts, it kind of makes you realize that these people in the military, they are human beings, and they should be treated as such. And unfortunately, I think our current administration is dropping the ball on that. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I mentioned normalization of nuclear weapons in a previous episode, but Marjorie Taylor Greene basically is coming out and saying that Trump is discussing the use of nukes, of nuclear weapons, which then really tells you they are getting really desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. It's absolutely insane that this is actually being discussed, that people are not using this as a way to, remove him from office. This is just incredible. You're losing badly, but because of your pride, because of your weakened mental condition, you just simply can't bring it to an end. It just, I, I just don't know how do you even justify, how do you even try to explain that? None of it makes any sense at all. And if that's how we are here away from the battlefield, imagine the kinds of things going through people's minds in the battlefield. You're exhausted, you're hungry, living conditions are bad, you're stuck on a ship with the same people and they're getting on your nerves, but there's no way to get rid of them. There's no way to get away from them. You got to be with them 24/7. It just is unimaginable to me. So there was a story floating around. Apparently it was from 6 days ago, but I only saw it today, where there's a rumor, emphasis on the rumor of a mutiny, or at least a brawl, a big brawl, a big fight on the USS Abraham Lincoln. Probably propaganda, but uh, I personally think it's possible, right? If the conditions really are that bad, and not everyone is stable and even keeled and able to tolerate diverse adversity. I mean, imagine some of these guys are parents. They haven't seen their kids in nearly a year. They haven't been home since before Thanksgiving. It's just, I don't know. I don't know how I would be, but I could see that if I had to spend all my time with people I really don't like that much, it will really get under your skin. I don't care how much discipline has been imposed on you, it will go by the board if conditions are bad. And then on top of it, you have a president who says, yeah, they got to stay out longer. This is nothing. Wow. Okay. From a guy who went to Canada or got some kind of medical exemption for Vietnam, for him to so callously say these things, it's just wow. It's just hard to believe. Larry Johnson was saying, he was talking about it and he heard that story and basically, oh yeah, he was talking to Haifeng and they read the story and he wasn't surprised, right? It's like it's totally plausible, but he focused more on the suicide. And he says that someone who he knew he was in the who knew about Navy things like this, that if that the actual number of attempted suicides are probably going to be 6 times more than the reported number for various reasons, right? You have underreporting, someone caught them before it actually happened and they didn't report it. It wasn't put in his record, whatever. So if there were 5 attempts, then it's probably more like 30 attempts. So this mutiny story, that if it is true, which I don't know, it's hard to imagine it being true, killing your own sailors. I don't know. But 7 killed? Huh. I don't know. I hope not. I really do. But the way that the story is being told by Iran is that there was a visit from an advisor to U.S. Central Command, Brad Cooper, hit an advisor to Brad Cooper, addressed the crew, and it triggered the chaos. First, people booed him, water bottles were thrown, then the knives came out, etc. Uh, Imagine if some of them had voted for Trump because he said he was going to end all of this. And then now they're almost a year at sea. You go from him promising to release the Epstein files to them being stuck in the ocean for the Epstein elites. It's just, yeah, it would make me angry. So to wrap up this episode, we have to remember, we must tell our kids, at least that's what I've done. My kids went to public school, but I always talk to them. I ask them what they learned and then try to give them a different narrative and put everything in perspective. Because eventually you have to confront all of these issues. I'm not going to shelter my kids from knowing that all of this happens in the world, but rather I would rather they be equipped to understand, to analyze, and to be able to keep a level head and to know who to trust. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.